I made $122,000 in 6 weeks, which sounds, I don't know, maybe a bit arrogant, but the whole point of this episode is to tell you exactly how I did it so that if you want to make money in property or get on the property ladder, you can too. I never thought I would own a property. I never thought that I would make money in property. It just felt so out of reach for me. But the approach that I used is something that literally anyone can do. It's called the BRRRR approach. So it's buy, renovate, rent, refinance, repeat. So it's the idea that you basically buy low, you add value so that it's like the value of that property is immediately increased. You rent it out, you refinance with the bank, and then you basically use that property to go again and again and again. So this is an amazing approach to property. It's something that I'm incredibly proud of, a huge advocate for. And in this episode, you will meet Peter West. And he is the guy that I did this with. If you're interested after listening and you want to do this as well, you can email us. We will put our email address in the podcast show notes and we can put you in touch with him. But yeah, this is a huge conversation. It's full of so much knowledge. We've split it up into 2 episodes. So this is part 1, and next week we'll be dropping part 2. This is a video podcast, and if you would like to watch it on YouTube, you can click the link in the show notes. I've been really excited to put this episode out, so I hope you really enjoy it. And if you have any questions at all, comment where you're listening to this podcast. Welcome to our brand new property podcast.
Woohoo!
This has been in the works for a long time, and we're so excited to finally be able to speak to you regularly every month. We're going to have a property podcast where we talk about home ownership, property investing, and that's whether you're trying to buy your first home, you're trying to buy your second home, maybe you're wanting to buy an investment property. And that is exactly why we're proud to be partnering with BNZ, because they get it, they understand that there's no 2 situations that are the same.
And having a BNZ home loan partner in your corner, you'll always have the expert advice and tools that can help you make it happen. So thank you so much, BNZ, for helping empower this property podcast.
Oh, Pete, it's so exciting to have you here. This has been something we've spoken about for like months. And actually, when I was like doing the prep sheet and planning what we would talk about, I was like, oh my God, we've actually kind of now known each other for like 9 months.
Yeah, I think Michelle, my wife, told me to get in touch with you, and that was back in September.
It was ages ago.
Check my messages. Yeah.
Okay, so Michelle, Pete's wife, absolute legend, so lovely. So she listened to the podcast and she heard me just like banging on about how I wanted to get into property and was like, Pete, help her out.
Yeah, so Michelle, big fan of The Curve and avid listener. So yeah, whenever you started talking about property, whenever it was late last year, September or something, she was like, hey, why don't you, or Soph is keen to get into property, why don't you just flick her a message and see if you can help out? So I did, slid into your DMs, and credit to you, you didn't dismiss me. You sort of,
Well, I was about to say, like, the DM slide is like, can go one of 2 ways, right?
100%.
And I think because I could tell, okay, this is going to sound so weird, but when you see a message, if it's like well written, good punctuation, someone's like made an effort to write it, you're like, okay, which sounds like such a strange thing to say, but if someone goes and sends like yo, can we catch up? I'm into property or something, you're kind of like, nah. But your message was like, I was like, I think this guy knows what he's talking about. And also I was in a position where I was really trying to explore what it would look like for me to buy a property, because I, as a Kiwi living abroad, I couldn't go and buy my first home. And I knew that. So I was like, it sort of felt like this pipe dream where I didn't really know like how or where or what. Like I was actually looking into doing the gift of deed or deed of gift, or like basically like gifting my amount to someone to put into their property. But it's quite risky, and I trust all my friends that I would have done it with, but I was just like, I don't love the idea of it not being in my name. So anyway, I was in a position where I wanted to explore the different options. And I can't even remember. I wish that we had that message, but basically it was like,
I went back
do
and
you
looked.
have it?
Yeah,
oh my God, you've got your phone.
I can grab it if you
Oh,
want.
can we get it?
Do you want me to?
Yes. Look, this is probably longer than I remember. Perhaps we won't read that. But essentially, it was Pete explaining the fact that he has an approach to property, which to me was really new. I'd never heard of it before. And I was like, oh yeah, this sounds kind of interesting. So let's just give some context as to who you are, your experience in the property world, etc. Because even for me, the idea of like, oh, I worked in property development or construction or like, I don't know, I've never worked in that industry. So maybe just give context for the sorts of stuff you've done in the last like decade.
Yeah, so I had a corporate career for 10 years. Started out with Fonterra and, went down that corporate path for 10 years. But in the last 5 years, I started doing property on the side.
Yeah, so this was kind of originally more of a passion project, kind of.
Yeah, correct. Well, it depends how deep you want to go, but I originally...
Deep. I don't know if you've listened to the podcast, Pete, that's deep.
I studied ag science and I always thought Bachelor of Agricultural Science, it's pretty much 101 of farming. How does grass grow? How does soils work? All the good stuff in life. Soils is really fascinating, by the way. But anyway, side story. And so when I went to university, I thought I wanted to be a farmer. A few different reasons, but when I was growing up, I was brought up in Te Awamutu and everyone with wealth around me was dairy farmers. So I thought, okay, that's going to be my vehicle to sort of financial independence, have my own business, etc. I went farming in 2020 after 10 years in a corporate career, and whilst I didn't hate it, I didn't love it enough to be happy in like 20 years' time. So I was like, right, that dream
Which is pretty
gone.
massive, right? To be like, okay, I'm going to move to a farm, I'm going to go and give this a go. And then to be like, shit, maybe it's not the one. It's brave.
Yeah, I'm glad I tried it. I had a really supportive wife who was like, yep, do it because you'll never know if you don't try it. And
what a legend, by the way, because that's huge. Like, so for context, hopefully she's fine with us saying this, but Michelle's, she's actually Irish. And so Pete and Michelle met in Ireland. I always say it like I'm a pirate, Ireland. And so to move to New Zealand, one thing with you, amazing. Then to move to a farm in New Zealand is like another. So pretty supportive.
So we moved from London to Matamata to a dairy farm. So pretty big change for Michelle, but she took it in her stride. But yeah, went farming, realised I didn't like it or like it enough to be happy in 20 years' time doing it with a, happy marriage. So sort of binned that off and quit. And then I was sort of going, okay, well, what's my vehicle to wealth and financial stability, security? Not necessarily driving Ferraris, but just a bit of financial stability. And so I looked around and property was the next best thing. So that I was like, right, let's go 100 into that. And so started that journey 5 years ago. So I'm still relatively new.
I was going to say, God, you're actually like quite fresh in a good way.
In the scheme of things.
Yeah.
But jumped straight into it, went into development, and then I've gone into various different strategies since then. But as of June last year, I've gone full-time property trading, so flipping, and then also helping out people such as yourself.
Yeah. Okay. So you said so many things I want to backtrack on. So the idea of, 5 years ago, just to set the scene, because I think there's quite I don't know if it's misconception, but I certainly had it. And for a long time, buying, selling property, flipping, all the different strategies was kind of not a surefire way to grow wealth, but it was guaranteed in a way. And I know there's like no returns that are guaranteed and you can always like totally fuck up a project. But generally buying and selling property or buying and holding was a way, like as soon as you got on the ladder, it was kind of like, nice, you're good, you're sorted. 5 years ago, property was still doing really, really well in New Zealand, but it was less of like a surefire, like tick, you're in property, you're going to do well. Like you had to be really strategic about it. So when you first went into property and you were first like trying different strategies like you mentioned, what were some of those different strategies? Because I know you can buy and hold, which is more of like a passive approach. More active would be like the flipping. But can we go into some of those subsets of categories under both of those big kind of active, passive, and what ones you explored?
Yeah. So first, I suppose, maybe I'll just give my definition of active and passive. So for me, a passive is where you buy a property, typically a new build property, so it's just been built or, maybe 1 or 2 years old, and you don't do anything to it. You effectively just hold on to it and let Father Time take care of the rest and hopefully, or historically, see that property go up in value over time. Active is where obviously, or not obviously, but you do something to the property. So you renovate it or maybe you subdivide it. You're forcibly appreciating that the value of that asset. So you're not waiting or you're not necessarily as reliant on capital gains over time.
So Active is actively adding value, actively trying to increase your returns and how much money you're making on that asset.
Yeah.
Passive is kind of sitting back and letting the property market, in terms of like the value of that, increase over a period of time without making too much of an effort to add. It's more just the buy and hold.
Yeah, you're not really doing anything to that property. And there's pros and cons to both, and we can get into that. But you're pretty much reliant on the market to take care of it. So it's pretty much out of your hands, and hence it's it's referred to as a passive investment or a passive property.
And so over the last 5 years, what have been some of those strategies that you've done or like the projects that you've tried and the different ways you've tried? Because also, just to your point when you said, for you, and a passive approach is actually more new build. Like, I would have bucketed any purchase of a house and buying and holding as passive, but you don't.
No, because you could, like, I'm sure we'll get there, but if we talk about your property you've purchased, it was quite tired and run down, so we purchased it and we renovated it, but you're going to hold that for 10, 15 or however long. So that was still a buy and hold, but it's an active approach. So in terms of the different strategies within active approach, I've tried development, which is where you buy a piece of land, maybe with a house on it, maybe not, and actually build some houses and then sell those. I've tried transportable homes, which is where, once again, you maybe have some land and you transport an existing house onto that. I've done flipping.
Whoa, you've really done quite a few.
Yeah, there's a few different ones. I've done flipping, which is where you buy an old rundown home, renovate it and put it back on the market as soon as possible and try to sell it for a profit. Subdivision, so buying a house, subdividing it off and selling the two different houses. And then multi-unit, which is effectively a block of flats. So where you've got 3 or 4 flats under one roof and renovating those and buying and holding them. So a few different strategies across the years.
In terms of being this kind of, in a way, almost being a side hustle or I'm going to try this out and see how I go. Firstly, it's super brave, but also it's even more brave to try lots of different types. Were there any that were higher risk, that felt more stressful, like any that you gravitated towards more than other experiences?
Yeah, I have, and that's been the benefit of trying different ones, and it's taken me through trying those different ones. I've probably landed on the sweet spot now of what I think is the best, but definitely probably development is hugely risky, and I got pretty lucky with just my timings. It wasn't any great planning or anything, but I managed to sell those properties just before property prices fell off a cliff, because if I hadn't, then I'd be looking at some serious losses realistically.
Yeah.
So that was pure luck. I can't say there was any great planning of when I tried to do it. But definitely just the dollar value that you're dealing with, if you're building 4 houses, it might be in the millions of dollars, versus if you're flipping a house, you might be spending $70,000, $80,000. So if you get it wrong by $10,000 on a flip, you're only up by $10,000. But if you get it wrong when you're spending $2 million, it's just the scale is a lot bigger. And so there's obviously a lot more money on the line with the development. So.
And also, I guess, the audience and the people that are listening are not ones who have probably, I imagine, $1 million to go and do a subdivision with 4 houses, So even being in a position where you can, because there's so many different ways of doing it and making money in property, but also we're all restricted to what our personal cash bandwidth is, So is the reason that you landed on, and what we'll get into in a second, this particular approach, is that because it's less risk, it's less capital required, it's more accessible for people, or is it like a combination of everything?
Various different factors, but one of the cons of development or flipping is that at the end of the day, once you've sold that project or property, you don't actually have an asset at the end of the day, and you get wealthy through property, or you get wealthy through property by holding an asset for a long time. Versus with both those strategies, you make your money and then you got a little bit of money in your bank, but you don't actually have an asset. So if house prices go up, you have to go back to the market, buy another house, and you're sort of back at square one. Whereas with a buy and hold approach, you get an asset, it goes up in value over time, and you generate wealth through that. So
I guess then, if we were to compare this to the stock market, it would be similar to what's happened to me, where I've gone and bought stocks. I've made a quick return because I bought them, say, let's just use Netflix as an example. Since I bought it, it's gone up honestly, I reckon 50% since I bought it, like heaps. It would be like me selling out, taking that money, but then not holding for the next 20 years. The difference there is like it's almost a quick cash injection opposed to long-term wealth. And the idea of like buying and selling in the stock market, when you sell out, you're missing out on all those future returns. So while it can be fun to be like, do you know what? I've just made $500. I'm going to take that out. If you can emotionally leave those in there knowing that it's going to – the other day Vic used the example of Berkshire Hathaway and Warren Buffett. If you'd invested $1,000 with him 60 years ago, it would have turned into $55 million.
Not bad.
But over 60 years, how many times would you have been like, I'm going to take it out?
Yep,
like I do it
100%.
every couple of months.
Yeah.
So
it's the equivalent of being like a day trader. If we're using like the share analysis, being a day trader versus someone who just bought the Berkshire Hathaway stock and just sat back and watched it grow for the last 60 years. So it's great. You can get some massive wins. Like day traders, I'm sure, get some massive wins, but the person who just sits back and probably holds the Berkshire Hathaway shares over 60 years is probably
they're the ones laughing.
They're the one who's going to win over the long term. So definitely my goal is to buy sort of as many properties and hold them for as long as possible.
So, okay. We've landed personally with your property portfolio and how you approach it, because I know we'll get to kind of the business side of things and the gap in the market in a second and my experience working with you, but would love to talk about your own personal property portfolio. Like, where are you at the moment? Like, how many properties do you own, and were any of those ones you renovated? Yeah, what does yours look like? Do you buy and flip? Do you do all of the above still?
Yeah, so I've got a pool of money which I use to do the flipping full time. So that's that pool of money, it's used to buy the house and renovate it. And then once that I sell the house, it's reinvested into the next property. So I've got a bit of cash there. And then in terms of my buy and hold, so I've got 2 properties, and then across those 2, there's 7 rentals. So one of them is a multi-unit.
Multi-unit is kind of like just 6 or 7 apartments, right? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I guess there's a loose definition, maybe like 4 and above, or 3 and above is roughly where you start to call it a multi-unit.
Oh.
And so both of those are in the Waikato. That's where I'm from. I sort of know that market. And it's a pretty good market for a buy and hold because it's a lower price point than Auckland, so you can still achieve really good yields. And that lower price point means it's more accessible for someone who's starting out their journey like me.
And so yield, is the yield capital gain? Is it the same thing or not?
No. So in terms of residential property, when people refer to yields, typically it's gross yield, which is the rent you get per annum, divided by how much you purchase that property for.
And that's yield.
That's yield.
And why is it an important number to use as a metric?
It's a very rough figure which you can easily gauge whether a property's going to pay its mortgage by itself or not. The other term which people refer to is it cash flow positive or cash flow negative. And so if you've got a 7 or 8% gross yield property, then it's going to pay for itself in terms of pay its mortgage, pay its rates, insurance, etc. And you're not going to have to put any money into that property.
And when you say 7 or 8%, and therefore that means that it will be kind of like self-sufficient. Is that because mostly 7 or 8% would be above what someone would be paying in interest?
Yeah, it obviously depends on what the interest rate is. If the interest rates are 2%, then you don't need to be getting as much rent. So it sort of fluctuates. But if you take a 10-year average of, let's say, 6%, then a 8% gross yield property is going to pay for all the mortgage, all the rates, all the insurance, etc., and you're not going to have to top it up.
But that's not including paying down the principal, is it? Like you're paying off your mortgage, or is that actually sometimes also including?
Once again, depends on the interest rate, but typically, no, that would just be interest only.
Which you can do.
Correct.
And particularly with investment properties, that's what a lot of people do, right?
Yeah. I saw the other day, I think one of the banks has just offered 10 years interest only for property investors, with the logic being that in that 10 years, the property is going to go up in value, and therefore, once you sell it, you can pay back the principal that you're owed.
That's quite cool.
Yeah.
Maybe we talk about the gap in the market that you saw and the strategy that you've landed on is kind of your, okay, I think this is where I'm going to double down and help other people to make money in property.
Yeah.
Let's talk about what it's called, what it means, like what's the general approach?
Yeah. The term is called BRRRR, which is an acronym.
Oh my God, can I just tell you what that reminds me of?
Go on.
Do you remember Bring It On?
Oh,
No, definitely not the target market.
Maybe different upbringings.
Don't worry.
It's a dance
there
movie,
will
isn't
be girls listening that know what I'm talking about. There's this song and it's like, BRRRR. Does this sound, no?
Yeah, I know.
You know what
it's
I mean?
Cold
Yeah,
in here.
thank you. He does know. Don't pretend to be too cool. You know what fucking Bring It On
Isn't
is.
that primary school?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's showing my age massively. So BRRRR, so BURR.
BRRR.
Oh, BRRRR, like literally BRRRR, it's cold in here. Yeah, cool.
Which stands for buy,
Yep.
renovate, rent, refinance, and repeat. I forgot an R, 4 R's, which speaks to the process that you go through when you do this type of project. So it's effectively you buy a property with the intention of holding it for 5, 10, 20, a long time. You then renovate it to try and add value to that property. You then rent it out. You then refinance, so go back to the bank and say, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Bank, this property is now worth X. I want to get that equity out. And then you go and repeat the process and buy your second or third or fourth or however many properties you want.
And I think that is the key here, the refinancing part, which, I don't know, I guess this whole process for me, when people talk about the property ladder, it's just such a penny drop moment of like, of course, because as soon as you've got equity in something, the idea that you can kind of like borrow against it or like take money out to go and like further leverage yourself in another property just makes so much sense.
Yeah, a lot of people, myself included, probably didn't realize, or at least it took me a long time to realize, that you can actually, leverage a gain against a property. I always assumed that you just had to have a pot of money sitting
I always thought that.
But you don't. So you can, refinance, take that equity gain, use that as a deposit for your next property, and then go again, which is pretty powerful.
Oh, it's so amazing. So basically, Pete and I had been talking. We'd been doing some Zooms. I was like, this guy feels kind of legit. He's nice. He's also married. So like I was like very aware that you were like, this was so professional, which I know that sounds weird, but I do think there's like a safety or a like trust when you're really aware what someone's intentions are. And like the fact that you had like your presentation, your slides, it was like, yeah, I don't know. I got to the point where I was like, okay, I really trust this guy. I actually would love to try this approach I've never heard of before, which is so rogue. You're like, it's pretty like ballsy to trust a random dude that's like DM'd you off Instagram. And you're like, do you know what? Yeah, let's try and work together. Use my deposit that I've tried to save for my whole life. Let's try and do a project together.
Yeah, it's credit to you. And
I don't think it is. I think
but it would have been very easy just to dismiss that and being like, who's this random person? I did specifically mention my wife, so you didn't think I was just creeping.
I think it was a very good tactic, in all honesty. So, not that we have hardly any men that follow or listen to the curve, so it's like.
True that. But yeah, I mean, it would have been pretty easy for you just to dismiss that. So as I say, credit again for being open and curious enough to sort of explore. And then, I mean, it took us a while. We started speaking in September, and then took you a while to get the pre-approval, obviously, and I think you've documented the challenges of that. But it was great. And then I think we reconnected back in January. You reached back out and said, hey, we're ready to go, and we jumped at it. So it was a cool process.
It was really cool. So basically what happened was, when Pete and I spoke, we like very much, and from the beginning, were super clear on numbers and like what it was required. So what I also didn't totally understand with the BRRRR approach is that it depends where you're buying for how much you need. And the real difference for me and like what really landed was like, okay, I don't have enough for a first home. Also, I don't live in New Zealand. That's not really an approach I'm considering, but I knew I wanted to invest in property. And the idea of an investment property, I vaguely knew you needed a higher deposit. So I kind of fully dismissed that as an option. But then when we'd been talking, I'd started to be more open to the idea of, okay, like I could invest in a way, way, way lower price point. A house that I, to be honest, probably wouldn't live in an area that I probably wouldn't consider. But it just opened my eyes up to the idea of, okay, like you don't have to go and buy $1 million Herne Bay property to get into the property market.
Correct.
There's actually a huge amount of opportunity in lots of different parts of the world as well. Like obviously the main centers, like the center of London, the center of Auckland, the center of like hubs where most people want to live are probably going to be out of my price range. But I started to realize like, okay, so if I was to then do an investment property somewhere where I needed a 30% deposit, but I only did a $500,000 house or a $400,000 house. So basically I was like, okay, this is potentially risky, like there's this guy that I think knows what he's talking about. I'm pretty sure this is legit, but I was also like, this is my whole life savings, and do I also want to put all of it in the property market? So I was like, that's what I was kind of considering for a while, was like, do I want to go and put all of this in property, or would I feel more comfortable doing less? So anyway, I started speaking to my flatmate at the time, and I was explaining this opportunity, and he was like, oh, I've always been really interested in this approach to property. I almost did it when I lived in Australia. If you wanted to go in with someone, let me know. And I was like, that actually could work. And by the way, this is a friend that I literally had moved into the house like 3 weeks earlier, which just speaks to like how risky I feel like I am, because that could have gone totally tits up. But anyway.
But you did raise that during our initial discussions.
Oh, did I? What did I say about it?
Well, you just said, I'm thinking about going in with a friend.
Yes.
And
that's
I
right.
sort of came back with like, that's great, but have you thought about this? Which was good for you guys to have that conversation. Like, okay, what happens if someone wants to sell in 2 years, or how does it affect your relationship property and all that good stuff? So it can be done, but you definitely do need to have some potentially tough or awkward conversations. What happens if we stop being friends, et cetera, right at the start.
Yeah. Oh God, I kind of forgot about that. That's right, because you emailed me a bunch of questions to ask.
Go and ask.
And I was like, okay, I've prepared some questions. I was like, I'm just with these things I want to ask you. And it was things like, how long do you want to hold it for? How long do you need this? Do you need this money back in the next few years? Because I really wanted to buy something and hold on to it for like a minimum of 5 years. And he was very much on the same page. And we really like worked through this, and we were like, okay, sweet. We're totally aligned here. We want the same approach to property. This is purely like a business transaction, and we wanted to approach it in that way. We weren't like, I don't know, from the very beginning, we were like, let's like try this properly. So essentially, we went down the process of both having to get pre-approved, which like for everyone that's listened to our earlier property episodes was just like, fucking hell, such a nightmare. But finally we got pre-approved, both of us, for $500,000. So we were joint and like equally responsible for that. And so that was kind of like, we went back to Pete and we were like, okay, we know what we've been pre-approved for. So like, this is our budget. Will this work? And then we started chatting about like, the different locations and how it could work. And it's quite funny because I was even just thinking the other day, like back to the conversation that I had with my friend, because we sort of properly started kicking this off at the start of the year. Every time I spoke to somebody and I was like, this is what I'm doing, they were like, capital gains in live-in aren't great. Like, are you sure you should be trying to buy in Auckland? And I was kind of like, fuck. I'm like, I know that there's truth to what you're saying, but I didn't really know how to respond at the time. And so I think there was a few times that both with the friend I was buying with and with you, I was like, should we be looking at, different locations? So can we just talk about that before we move on? Like, why and how is it still okay and potentially really lucrative financially to buy in other places where the capital gains or hot property energy isn't quite as intense as like the center of a main city? Yeah.
So firstly, you touched on, you originally thought that property was out of your, you thought you needed to throw down $1 million in Herne Bay. And a lot of people aren't aware that you can still buy a really good property, or at least a decent property for, 400, even maybe 350 K out in the regions. And so that's, it is possible, and it is really good to get that message out there. You don't have to buy in Auckland. But in terms of coming to that point of why you don't have to buy in Auckland, provided you buy in a town that has decent employment opportunities and people are still wanting to live there, the capital gains will be achieved. Historically, I think Auckland's gone up at 6.5%, and the rest of the country is like 6%.
That's still bloody good.
Still bloody good. Provided you don't purchase in a town where there's an elevated level of risk. For example, Ratahi is a small town in Central Plateau, and there was one employer there was a mill, and that mill's recently shut. So that town, doesn't have great...
Is a mill like a wood mill? Like they were cutting trees down to...
Exactly, bang on. And so that, like, if you purchase a place there, that isn't going to have good capital growth over the next 10 years. But provided you're buying in a place that has good employment, a good economy, people want to continue to live there, you're going to still, well, based off historic evidence, you're still going to get capital gains. Who knows what's going to happen in the future? But if you look historically, those places have still managed to achieve really good capital gains.
So it's the idea that you don't want to buy in the middle of nowhere, because there is a chance that, like, A, you might not be able to rent it out, but also the capital gains might not be there. And the whole point of this is to try and buy property that's going to increase in value.
Yeah, rightfully or wrongfully, the vast majority of wealth generated through property is through the capital gains. Yes, you get a little bit of money through rent if it's cash flow positive, but it's not massive. It's enough to pay the mortgage, and that's about it. So how we generate wealth through property is holding it for a long term, and it goes up. And those other centres, Whangarei, smaller towns like Te Awamutu, where I'm from, they still get really good capital gains. So you absolutely can still achieve really good gains over the long term without being in Auckland.
And so let's just talk about the global property. I know that, you're way more focused on New Zealand, but do you think if someone was, based in the UK or in Australia, the same premise could apply? You just need to look at what historical capital gains are in particular areas to get a feel for where there's like growth and stimulation in the property market. Comparatively, like I'm just thinking in the UK, there's so many cute little country towns, right? And there might be people listening who can't afford to buy in London or any of the main centres like Manchester. Is the idea you just want it, because I didn't even know that stat of like, Auckland 6.5% on average, the rest of the country is around 6%. You just want to understand that, like, what the historic data in the growth in those regions are.
Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, I've only bought and sold properties in New Zealand, so I can't speak too much around the strategies and stuff in the UK and Australia, but definitely there are people, and I follow them, doing the BRRRR methodology in Australia and in the United Kingdom. And so they still work 100%, just the towns are different. So instead of buying in London, you're buying up in Leeds or something, where it's a little bit cheaper. And New Zealand, just a comment, New Zealand is nirvana in terms of property. I don't think we quite realise how lucky we have it here. We don't have stamp duty. For those who don't know what stamp duty is, in the UK and Australia, it's effectively a tax that you pay when you purchase a property, and it's a percentage, so maybe up to 3%, which is getting up there if you're buying a $500,000 property, for example. And of course, we don't have capital gains tax in New Zealand, whereas in the UK and Australia both have capital gains tax. Yes, we've got the bright line test, but if you hold your property for 10 years, you're not going to pay any tax on it, which is quite unique in the world. So how long it's going to be like that for, who knows? But right now, we don't have it. And so I guess you could call it lucky in that sense if you own property that we don't have those taxes.
I actually was talking to my goddaughter, actually, who's so intelligent and just like a million times smarter than me and half my age. And she was talking about the idea of not having capital gains tax. And she was just saying, I think we shouldn't use the words bullshit, but she was like, it's income. Like the fact that it's not taxed she was like, I don't think it's necessarily right. And I was like, gosh, I find it so interesting talking to different people about anything to do with the economy and money, because everyone's perspective's so different. And I feel like, for ages, it's like all hail Queen Victoria, which to be fair, she is fucking amazing and like has the most amazing perspectives on things. But just talking to different people and opening your mind up to the different ways of thinking. I don't know, when I spoke to her about it, to my goddaughter, I was like, how cool that you have an opinion on that. It's just interesting to hear.
Yeah, 100%. I haven't really heard a great argument for why we don't have a capital gains tax, if I'm honest. Like, other than I don't really like paying tax. I don't want to pay more, but I don't know if that's really the best argument for it.
Yeah.
So I can see probably in the not too distant future when New Zealand does have a capital gains tax, because as you say, if you're making money off it, then it is income. So yeah, watch the space, I guess. Maybe changing.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about New Zealand and why it is nirvana. What are the things that make the New Zealand property market so unique and such an amazing way to make money?
Yeah, well, I suppose firstly, generally there's obviously property in generic terms, which is powerful because obviously you can borrow other people's money to buy the asset, which is pretty unique, or at least you can borrow a lot, up to 80% of the value of the asset, which is pretty unique for property. But New Zealand specifically, I suppose it comes down to, once again, like any asset, supply and demand. On the demand side for property, New Zealand's a fantastic place to live. So we've got really high net migration as a percentage of our population historically. It's chilled out a little bit in the last year or so, but people want to live here. And so we've got lots of people coming here, which drives up, more people need houses. So there's always been really good demand for housing. On the supply side, we're quite restrictive in our planning laws here in terms of what you can build, how many houses you can build. For example, in Hamilton, there's probably only 3 or 4 places where you can build townhouses.
Whoa.
Everywhere else has to be, a duplex or a single standalone house, which keeps a real restriction on the supply side, as well as where you can build. We're pretty good at saying, right, this is the town boundary. You can't build over there in the rural zone. So it does keep a lid on the supply side.
I guess also we're such a new country with so much space. We're kind of starting fresh comparatively to a lot of the world. So there, as you say, there's less houses, but we're also in a unique position where, because not heaps has been done, we can dictate the way that it happens. So I imagine that's like, it's not a free-for-all like it would have been 400 years ago in parts of Europe and the rest of the world. We've only been around for a few hundred years and there's a lot of land still. But interestingly, what it doesn't mean is that we're just going hard and building all these houses. We're actually doing it in a more measured, controlled approach.
Yeah, bang on. There's still bits of land here that haven't been subdivided.
Have you been to the Catlins? Honestly, I was like, no houses, no people. It was like the middle of nowhere. It was in the South Island. Yeah. And I was just like, oh my God, if there was an apocalypse, we would all be moving to the Catlins. Yeah, there's
bugger all people here.
There's
you only have to drive
many.
around the South Island and you see one house every 10 Ks.
It's crazy.
So you're right, there's lots of land that still hasn't been developed or subdivided or cut off versus, you go to the UK, they've been subdividing and cutting up land for, thousands of years now.
Yeah.
And so there's still pretty, lots of opportunities out there at a reasonable price point, arguable, but you still can pick up relatively cheap bits of land out there.
Gosh, I just feel like it's such an exciting, different way to think about investing. So I want to bring things back to the house, Escalona Street. Is it fine to say where it is? I feel like that's fine. If anyone wants to go see it.
Did we ever nickname it?
Yeah, true. We haven't named it.
It's kind of a funny street name, isn't it? It's not easy to work off.
Escalona. I kind of like it.
No,
Escalona sounds, it almost sounds like it could be Spanish. Escalona. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
it's got Spanish colours to it too, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's got that random design on the front, which
design.
I kind of liked, to be honest. I was like, oh, this is fun and different.
You wanted to keep the floor.
What?
You wanted to keep
oh my
the
God,
lino.
that's right. The lino was so cute. I loved it. I thought the kitchen was a vibe.
Yeah.
I know why we redid it, but so, okay, backtrack to the moment where I was like, Pete, we got pre-approval. Holy shit, we're good to go. So our budget was $500,000.
Yes.
Which meant that we needed to have between us, as in not you, but me and my friend, which is effing annoying, we can't say his name. But anyway, we needed, I think it was if we were going to spend $400,000, we needed about $230,000 for the deposit of 30%, which I think was 120 divided by 2. So we both had to put 60,000 in for our deposit. And then we were estimating around 80,000 for the renovation-ish. Yep. So it was about 40,000 each. So all up, we were sort of thinking 100 to 110,000 each was going to go into this property. Is that right?
Yeah. So, when I originally sent that message to you, I sort of mentioned the KPIs, which was we're going to try buy property for around that 450 mark. We're going to spend 70 to 80 on it, and we're going to try get it valued up around that 600, 650 mark. Our goal for you was trying to achieve a net gain of about 100K.
Yeah.
With a 7 to 8% gross percent yield.
So for anyone that doesn't know what that means, essentially the plan was, okay, and this is what Pete said from the beginning. He was like, you don't want to go buy property, go through the renovating and then not making an immediate gain. Like there's just no point. You may as well just buy and hold something,
Correct.
Which is the whole point of the BRRRR approach is that you are trying to be active and passive at the same time. You're trying to buy a property, actively add value, and then hold it at least for 5 years. That was our plan. And so when it came to this property or any of the ones that we went in on, the idea was our target is to make 100 grand by the time we revalue the house. So after the renovations are finished, that was the goal. And so when it came to picking the house, we were actually in a really unique situation where we just started working together. This house came up and you were so good at like keeping expectations low. You were like, normally we go for heaps of houses and they're not always going to come through. You know, you're not just going to find one and it's going to all work out perfectly, because our approach is we have targets of what we want our investment returns to be. And if we don't think we can hit that, there's no point in doing it. So we have to be strict with what we buy and what we don't buy and what's needed to add value. Like, are we going to have to build a whole new roof? Because adding a roof doesn't really add much value to the house. So these were all things that I was like starting to learn as we were looking at these properties. But I guess let's use Escalona Street as an example. By the way, if anyone goes through Whangarei and goes through Escalona Street and you go to my house, please take a photo. Say hi to the neighbour, Marshall, great guy.
You'll hear him before you see
Totally.
him. Loves drum and bass music.
Oh my God, we'll get to that story another time. But so when you found this, so we were searching for Trade Me Property, we had a whole lot of alerts on. There was like, parameters with what we were trying to find. What was it about this house when you were like, tick, tick, tick? Like, what are the things that we're looking for with this particular approach?
So we started looking, and you're right, this all happened relatively fast. I tell anybody who I'm working with to stay patient. This can, when you're looking, it can take months, can take weeks. It's really just luck of the draw of what is available, and you've got no control over what comes on when. So saw Escalona, and the best way I describe it is you're looking for a bit of a shitty home, but not too shitty.
Totally.
So you want something that's run down cosmetically. So tired carpets, maybe the paint's chipped, maybe the bathroom hasn't been renovated in 10, 15, 20 years, but it's structurally sound. So you want to avoid anything that's really expensive. So you want to avoid anything like a new roof. You want to avoid anything like piles. Expensive to do anything, because obviously if they're bent, you're going to have to lift the house up or do something, do you know what I mean? Wooden joinery is horrifically expensive to replace. So,
joinery, doors and stuff.
Yeah, rotten windows. So you want to avoid rotten windows. Cladding of the house, if you've got rotten cladding.
Cladding again?
The outside of the house, so the weatherboards on the outside. Anything like that. And we also want to avoid any works which require building consent, because it adds time and cost to a project. So we're trying to find a house that is cosmetically a bit tired but structurally sound, and we can come in there and just cosmetically renovate it and not need building consent. And that's what Escalona ticked all those boxes for.
I think the other thing you just said there is a really good point, which is time. Because the time that it takes to renovate something, you're having to pay for your interest rates, your insurance, everything. You're covering all of your fixed costs to keep that house because you don't have someone in there paying rent.
Correct.
And I think that's a really important piece. So if someone takes 5 months to renovate, you're paying all of that interest, all those fees, and having to cover that yourself. So that's something you have to factor in. And for us, it was like, we knew we were probably going to have to pay, like our goal was 6 to 8 weeks, I think, for the renovation, which even in itself is super quick. And most people don't get it done in that amount of time, but you have to factor that in with your kind of lump sum to invest, right? Like, yes, you need your deposit. Yes, you need your renovation, but you need to pay insurance and interest and all of those things before you have rent coming in.
Yeah, and I think we spoke about that right at the start, where there's going to be, I think we said allow for 3 months of no rent coming in. So you're going to have a sufficient amount of money to cover your interest that you're paying on your mortgage and this is without any rent coming in. Obviously got your interest, you've got potentially rates, you've got the insurance, you've got power over that period. So you do need a bit of money sitting in a little pot to cover you for that period. But that's why, as you mentioned, time is absolutely critical. The faster you can get it done, the faster you can get it rented, means you're not having to cover as many of the costs just out of your own hard-earned cash.
Yes. God, I feel like there's just a lot to talk about. We might have to turn this into a two-parter water tease. But I guess just before we close off this conversation, what would be your absolute no's in terms of the BRRRR approach? What would we be looking for? Like, all the things that you've just said is great, but like, in order to make the numbers stack up, to be able to get that $100,000 uplift, there's lots of different factors, right?
Yeah.
Maybe could you just run through how you think about the numbers and therefore houses that just absolutely are a no-go? Because I think for me, like that part where you talk about, okay, well, this is the amount you put in, this is what it's worth at this stage, and, you know, like, that is all so methodical. So I know that you can't go into like too much detail on a podcast. And it's also, I mean, I know it's not like precious IP, but it kind of is because it's a learned skill. But can you just do an overview of like how you stack up and think about those numbers to make sure that when you're doing this, you are hitting that target of $100,000?
Yeah, so there's a definite process to it, which I think, we got to experience that process together, and you saw that it's not luck or it's not chance, it's very much methodical. And we went into that property knowing pretty much exactly how much we were going to make. We actually achieved it a little bit better than that, which is
we absolutely killed it. Pete killed it.
So that's nice. But in terms of, so a few things there. Firstly, there's some types of properties which I just don't even look at. And so those are things like standalone units, maybe like a block of 4, because you're trying to buy an asset that a lot of people want, and not so many people want like a 1-bed unit in a block of flats. Do you know what I mean? So you're trying to buy a family home that it's going to be relatively easy for you to sell down the line, because it's coming back to that supply and demand thing. If there's a lot of demand for it, it's going to go up in value.
And also rent it out, right? Like there's also that piece of like,
is it going to be easy to rent?
Yeah, and that comes down to location, number of rooms. Like if you're wanting a family to be, it's exhausting, isn't it? Being on a podcast, Pete's like, you just did like an audible exhale, like, fuck, just ask me another question.
I'm loving it. Sorry, people.
So it's the idea of like, there's so many things that you have boxes to tick. Otherwise, you just don't even go near it. Because for us with Escalona Street, it was 3 bedrooms, but for it to be super valuable and for it to be actually perfect for a family, we were like, we would need to add a room in here for the numbers to stack up. And so it was like you had to go and measure and be like, yep, perfect amount of space. We can whack a room in here that would work for a small child or whatever. And that all comes into the numbers that you figure out, right?
Yeah. So going back to the properties which you avoid, like just touching on some units, then I'd avoid some things like leasehold, for example. So you want something that's freehold. And then coming more specifically into the property itself, there's obviously we're just looking for thing that's cosmetically. Space is a big one that you've just touched on. We're always trying to add a bedroom, because that means we can get more rent, achieve more rent for the property, which helps you out paying your mortgage.
That's quite key, isn't it? That's really one of the key things.
Is
really
like, key,
is there a sleep out that can be turned into another bedroom? Is there enough space where like it's a weird layout and the kitchen's enormous and actually you could put another bedroom? Because I think, because that instantly, in terms of the value add, it's not just about the kitchen's disgusting and no one wants to be in the toilet. It's actually how many people could live in this house comfortably, and that's what bumps up the overarching value of the house, but also what you can rent it out as.
Correct. Like if we go back to your property, realistically, if we didn't add that bedroom, we may have been able to get like $600 for that property in terms of rent, but obviously we achieved $690. So yeah, that's a great example. We're adding that bedroom, which was relatively in your house was relatively straightforward. There was a nice little space. We didn't have to move any walls. It was just whacking up a bit of framing, bit of jib, voila. You got a new bedroom.
Well, would we say it was that easy?
Thanks to the builders. You guys are legends.
We actually should thank them. I feel like
absolutely.
they were legends.
I am very conscious when I talk, and I always use the term we, when I use my in content, I say we generated value for that because yes, I found the property and I project managed it, but realistically it's the 7 or 8 trades who did all the work.
100%.
They're the ones who transform that space. So it is seriously a team effort, and I'm lucky to have great trades and great relationships.
Yeah. He's a shit boss though. I think all the tradies really don't like Pete. I walked onto the site and he was just screaming at everyone.
Micromanager Pete.
Yeah. What are you doing with the jib? Wait, can we go back to the numbers side of things? Yeah.
I suppose the rough process in terms of coming back to that comment that it's a process. It's not luck. Obviously, the key figure is figuring out what the property is going to be worth at the end of the process, which there's a way in which we go about that, and I provide that reassurance to you and provide you evidence to that effect, saying, right, I think this property is going to be worth $650 when it's done. Here's the evidence which backs that up. And so we go into it knowing what that end figure is going to be. We then figure out what it's going to cost to renovate that property, and we do that through, I've now got, a good bank of evidence of this property costs this much to renovate, broken down into electrician, plumber, etc. And then also for Escalona, we got quotes before we did the work.
Yeah.
So we got tradies through, we got the work quoted, so we knew going into it exactly what it was going to cost. The next part of the equation is figuring out how much money you want to make out of the property. So in your case, we said, right, we want to make $100,000 for you. That then tells you obviously what you can afford to pay for the property. And now there's lots of properties where you go through that process and it doesn't work because they want more money than what you're willing to pay for it. For example, I've been to 12 auctions, all been unsuccessful, late. You went to one and you got one. So there's numerous times where you get disappointed, let down, whatever you want to call it, because the numbers don't work, and that's fine. That's part of the game. But what you do is you move on to the next, go find the next property, run the numbers, and it really is a numbers game in terms of getting offers out there, getting rejected and moving forward. It's just like keep getting punched in the face, go to the next property, move forward.
It's like Tinder. You're like, nope, not going to work, left. And then you might have a right, but they've also got to like swipe on you, Like there's still things that have to add up. Even if you're like, this is the one, you might not be able to get it for the amount you need to buy it for in order to make those gains. So it's a whole thing, it's a real whole thing.
I'm not getting a lot of swipe rights. You, on the other hand.
I got a solid swipe right, didn't I? That was so rare.
Yeah.
God, I just needed a break. I felt like I'd been pushing shit uphill for a while, and then all of a sudden when that auction happened, I was like, shit, yes. And we'll go into that auction in a second. Let's do a part 2 and we can talk more about my specific, like the numbers, how the auction went, blah, blah, blah. I think that you're going to be run off your feet.
I hope so.
But yeah, let's do another episode. Thank you so much for today. Speak to you in 5 minutes. But everyone listening, this won't be coming out for a while. Sorry.
Thanks for having me, Soph.
Okay. Did you love this episode?
Yes.
Have you got property front and centre in your mind? Sounds like you're a 5-year-old.
I know.
Now could be the time to take the first step towards what it is that you're wanting to buy. Whether that's your first home, whether that's a new flat, whether it's, buying another investment property.
And thankfully, BNZ has the expertise and tools to help you get started, and their home loan partners are ready whenever you are.
You can book an appointment, you can ask millions of questions. Trust me, that is totally fine. And you can start turning the property dream that you have into a plan and hopefully soon into a reality. I know from experience that this can feel quite overwhelming, but when you're working with experts who can actually help you get there, it's such a burden off your shoulders to know that you've got the advice and the tools that you need to actually make it happen.
We know how hard it can feel and like overwhelming and just, so like a fish out of water when it comes to buying properties. So we're so thankful to BNZ to be helping us create and empower this podcast so that people can learn, and we just want you all to succeed. We want you all to succeed. We're all in your corner. And this is going to be such a game-changing property podcast series.
Yes, and for anyone that is going through the process of either buying a house or a flat or whatever it is that you're trying to do, please let us know, because we would love to be cheering you on from the sidelines. But thank you so much again to BNZ for empowering this podcast.